Hello and welcome to the show. We start this week's Downhill Chaos with a Mk2 Golf GTI, and I was expecting this to set a fairly quick time. I was wondering how well that this car could do. The Covet that went down here a few weeks back was very, very quick, at least the standard one. Was pretty damn competitive, so I wondered how the Golf would fare. The first run of things may have gone slightly wrong. I got some understeer. Didn't realise quite how understeery this car was going to be until I tried to take the second corner a bit too fast for it, and well, it may have bumped into a bush. There is, however, a rather large problem with this car, in that the engine just likes to die on it. Basically, if one of the front wheels, I believe, gets sort of bent or turned round, then that kills everything at the front of the vehicle. Just everything turns off, which is quite bad, as it is very, very easy to break this car. Very easy to upset the vehicle. You take a bump a little bit too heavy, you don't even necessarily have to get sort of airborne. You can see the wheel spinning around. It doesn't even have to be one of the jumps. If you hit a bump, you hit something a bit too heavily, and it'll just shut the entire thing off. Yeah, that made things quite difficult. As you would just turn into a corner, things would be going fine. You'd turn into a corner. I managed to ping the wheel back out again, but no, the car's dead. It's not going anywhere. Yeah, you would take a corner. Of course, on the bigger jumps, that was suitably scary. It was weird. It seemed to survive the bigger jumps fairly well. It was the small bumps that seemed to do it. On this one here, the back suspension had collapsed as well on the run. But yeah, you hit some bumps at a slightly awkward angle, and that would kill sort of just everything of the car. Again, we didn't even get to the second corner on that one before it turned the vehicle off, and then yeah, we ran out of steering, and we kind of did a bit of a roll there, and this is a tough car to drive down here. It really is, because it's just you've got to be so careful with any of the bumps. Another problem that there was with the car, it has very soft and bouncy suspension, meaning that is very much a distinct possibility. It doesn't take much to get this car to roll over, and there was an annoying bump around here that would like to throw the car up onto two wheels. It wasn't the Mound of Doom that would cause this car to roll. It found another place. It didn't want to be consistent with everything else. No, it wanted to be unique and find its own place to have problems. There were many clips of the car, the engine just dying on the vehicle at various points. I reckon I have about 20-25 clips of the car, just the engine turning off at various points. Not particularly spectacular way to crash, unlike if we have a roll over the bumps after the first corner. Yeah, this was a time-consuming one. It was also one of the more annoying ones as well, because this kind of crash it looks quite impressive. You know, when it's sort of barrel rolling through the air and flipping and crashing and so on. When you just go around a corner and the engine turns off, that's quite frustrating. I will be honest. It's probably more closer to how a road car should be when you're trying to drive it down this. You know, these cars shouldn't survive this kind of terrain. Yeah, it was just going to a corner. I think what it might be, looking back at the replay, is if you were coming into a corner and you were steering at the same time, the wheels were pointing at an angle, and it was the stresses of that were doing the damage. Sort of like the wheels are at a very high angle, and as the car's landing, it's sort of twisting the wheel, if that makes sense to people watching. I can't really show you. Yeah, so this was the fastest run for the car. I got an awful lot on two wheels after the first corner. Managed to get it back down. I thought that was going over. On that attempt, I somehow managed to save it, and we could carry on with the run. The Golf is not the fastest of cars, I will be honest. In real life, the GTI Golfs are not hugely powerful. They're quite quick, they're quite rapid for what they are, but they certainly aren't the most powerful vehicles in the world. And yeah, the car does feel a little bit sluggish compared to some of the other vehicles that I've driven. It is also front-wheel drive. It does seem to struggle from time to time putting the power down. I think the suspension, it gets thrown about a bit on this run, and yeah, you can struggle with getting the power down in this car, and there isn't a huge amount of power in it. It's a nice car to drive. It's got good handling when it's not bouncing around all over the place, but yeah, just lack of power really. Not too understeery for a front-wheel drive car, but it's not quite got the traction of some of the other vehicles, and certainly hasn't got the power of the other vehicles. As we come across the line to finish the run for the Golf, and yes, that slight brush across the rocks, that was enough to kill the engine. Yet again, yeah, the Golf is a very fragile car when it comes to off-roading, which is more of the road cars probably should be like this when you are trying to throw them down this sort of a course. We move on next to a vehicle that is nowhere near as fragile. This is a Ford F250 with the, I believe we've got the biggest engine. All of the cars on here will have the fastest preset version, so I believe this is a four-wheel drive V10 version of this truck. At least that's what it's called on the namey thing. So yeah, considerably more power, considerably more weight, better suspension for dealing with the off-road bits, which is nice. It was lovely going from that incredibly fragile Golf that could break at any moment going into a corner to this that you could just chuck around and you didn't have to panic every time you saw a slight bump. It was quite nice going to this. On the first run, things were going remarkably well until the final corner. I just ran a little bit wide. I just got a bit too wide into the final corner, not really knowing quite where to brake for it. And then I couldn't recover. I just couldn't recover it. Ended up hitting a bump right on the outside that threw the Ford off the track, and well, we begin the descent down the the very steep sides of this mountain, and this it's not really looking too much like a car anymore, picking up quite a lot of speed as it slides down here. Yeah, you don't want to have a mistake at that part of the track, one of the most dangerous parts of the track, that one, as we clonk into a tree. The Ford is quite dead. That's not going anywhere anytime soon. Amazingly, the engine still worked, but the driveline is yeah, that's not going to go particularly far. The Ford was pretty damn easy to drive. The one thing you had to be aware of was this: it was very easy to roll this car. I say very easy, not quite as bad as perhaps the monster truck we had, but it did not take too much to roll the Ford. It's a relatively narrow vehicle, relatively high vehicle, meaning that yeah, rolling it was quite a distinct possibility. It is also quite a large vehicle. It drove pretty damn well considering the size and weight of this car. It had its moments of unmaneuverability. Especially coming into that corner. It's always very hard for sort of like the first couple of times working out the braking point for that corner, and on that occasion I got it completely wrong. Again, I was trying to take a nice line through the tree hairpin, and once more the Ford ended up upside down. This time it continued to roll and flip and crash off the course until it eventually came to settle a couple of tiers down and carried on working. Yeah, it was still going. It had a broken, one of the front wheels was bent to hell. I think actually the entire, like the steering on that corner had gone, and I wanted to finish the course with this vehicle just for laughs. Unfortunately, the front wheel that had all become disconnected to everything else jammed, and the truck wouldn't move anymore. You know, when your front wheels are pointing in two different directions, that's not really particularly good. I was trying to free the front wheel in the end, though. No, it wasn't to be, which is a shame. It did remarkably well though to survive that fall. And again, I was taking the slightly tighter line, and I could get away with it in this car. This was quite a nice handling vehicle, so you could position it where you wanted it to. I needed to be a bit careful though with the positioning, as it was very prone to rolling. Again, the truck survived despite landing quite heavily, I would imagine, on the nose of the vehicle. It's fine, it can carry on, it's still working. It's a bit second hand now, but yeah, it's a very, very strong pickup truck. This one survived an awful lot on this course, and it wasn't long at all until I got a clean run out of it. Yeah, this is a lovely vehicle to drive. from the previous one. You can chuck it around. Of course, this is much more designed for the off-roading, whereas a Golf is not really designed for dealing with this kind of terrain. A big Ford pickup truck certainly has the suspension to deal with it. Downsides to this car, not the fastest vehicle, certainly not the most powerful vehicle we've had down here. I would imagine it is fairly heavy, not got the quickest of the accelerations. Also, it is quite a large vehicle. Width-wise, no, but it is length, it is a pretty big vehicle, which means on a very narrow course, it can be a little bit of a pain at times. Takes a little bit of getting used to, especially when you go from a Golf that's diddy to a pickup truck that's huge. Yeah, I got a few corners a little bit wrong with this one. It was especially that tree hairpin that I was having problems. It is one of the tighter corners on the track, and yeah, you've got to be a little bit careful with a vehicle like this. But otherwise, no, this is a very nice vehicle to drive down here. It's very, very easy. Not, as I said, not the fastest of vehicles as we come around the final corner. Hasn't quite got that sort of crazy acceleration of some of the other cars and trucks that have been down here. But it made it across the line, and just for good measure, it had to end up on its side. I'm not entirely sure how that rolled. I mean, I was skidding it across the line as I normally do in an attempt to stop the cars before they smack into the building, and it's just the Ford decided that it wanted to be on its side. This is a weird one. The back of the car got caught on the shelving, and that somehow put the car onto its side. Our third and final vehicle today is a monster van, quite literally in many ways. We had a monster truck go down the course a few weeks ago, so we're going to have a go with this weird and wonderful contraption. Yeah, I didn't know what really to expect from this vehicle. Other than it probably would be a bit tricky to drive, and well, on attempt number one, the Mound of Doom would play its part in rolling the van into some scenery. Not surprising that it would be easy to roll this vehicle when you look at the huge ground clearance on it. There are some other problems though with this vehicle, far more prevalent problems than the rolling. It's just a little bit uncontrollable in places. It is a very large vehicle, it is a very heavy vehicle, and as you saw on that one, once it started sliding, it was very, very tricky to try and get it back in check. Now, on a normal place, that would be fine, but on a place that is as narrow as this, it causes some problems. You know, as you see there, again, not necessarily a spectacular crash. I'm just turning into the corner, trying to get the van to turn, and it just won't quite do it in time, and then you end up running out of road. And yeah, you don't have an awful lot of room for error with this. Again, after the first corner, tried to get it back under control for turn 2 and couldn't do it in time. Bumps didn't help, and it got thrown towards a tree. Yeah, the tree definitely won that battle. Normally, monster truck versus tree ends in favour of the monster truck. Not on that case. Again, with one of the biggest, probably one of the most impressive sort of looking vehicles with the monster van, it had some of the most useless of fails on that one. It's just, yeah, it was just slightly, quite a lot uncontrollable. If it wasn't having sort of silly fails, it was doing this at that particular point. This is a very big, very heavy vehicle, and the brakes were not the best at getting it stopped. And that's probably one of the biggest breaking points on the course. I just couldn't stop it in time. At the tree hairpin, well, that's never going to end well. It's one of those, I've turned it into a corner, I've realised I've turned it a bit too early, and there is bugger all I can do about it, and it's going to go on its side, because, yeah, it is a very large vehicle. As you can see by the bumper, I'd already had an off at some point on this run. Are we going to get it stopped in time? I was trying absolutely everything I could. No. Well, we did get it. No, it's got off the edge as well. Yeah, braking was a bit of a problem with this. Turning was a bit of a problem with this. Falling over wasn't as much of a problem as you would expect. I had more problems with the Ford falling over than I did with the huge monster van. Of course, that doesn't mean that it didn't from time to time. It has got, I would imagine, one of the highest centre of masses of any vehicle that we've had on here. However, it is a pretty damn stable vehicle. I was amazed how well you could chuck this into corners and it would stay on its wheels. I'm not sure quite how the thing's been made. I'm going to guess though a lot of work went into stopping this falling over all of the time, and the fact that it's got some of the widest tyres I have ever seen probably helps with that. On the clean run, I was playing a bit risky with the with a mound of dirt, I guess, on that one. Yeah, I think I've had all three of these on two wheels on that actual complete run, getting a bit close to rolling everything today, as is the FailRace way when it comes to downhill cars. You can see that the monster van does struggle with some of these turnings. It's also not the most powerful of vehicles. This isn't as quick as I was kind of expecting. I don't think it's as quick as the monster truck that I had down here, or perhaps it's the same engine in both of them. I think they're made by the same people, or the same person, I should say. But this might be heavier or whatever. It certainly doesn't feel as quick. It's not as quick as some of the other vehicles I've had down here. Of course, the huge suspension means that the bumps are really very little problem for this. It has no issue with bumps, other than if you clip the inside of a hill, it will roll you over. But no, these bumpy braking zones, there are no problem with it, provided you have braked early enough. The big problem with this is just getting it stopped in time for the corners, and it is somewhat lumbering through the corners. It does take a bit of work getting this thing turned. Much use of the handbrake was employed for the monster van. And we have another roller once we got across the finish line. Yeah, not the easiest of vehicles to drive, this one. It's just a bit too big for this particular course. It's huge for this particular course. Anyway, we move on to the times, and it's a pretty solid time for the Ford. A 1:22.5 puts it just fractionally behind the six-wheel drive pickup truck, slightly ahead of the Baldy, and a couple of seconds quicker than the Jeep Cherokee. A solid all-round car, that Ford. Nice vehicle to drive, good off-road. Just if it had sort of a bit more power, I think that could be really very, very quick. But as it is, just not quite fast enough to challenge the top vehicles. But still, a very solid all-round off-road car. Yeah, I quite like that one. I do quite like that one. The other vehicles, well, unsurprisingly, they are further down the leaderboard. The Golf GTI goes into 20th place with a 1:27.1. Yeah, you have to be so slow and slow cautious with that car. It also doesn't really have the power, even if it survived all of the bumps incredibly well. It's just not a quick enough vehicle, which is probably realistic to the Golf, to be fair to it. But yeah, it does struggle down there. And the monster van is a little bit further down with a 1:28.8, and that's just because you can't get it through the corners very well, because it is such a huge vehicle. You look at the width and the size of this course and compare it to the actual width and size of the monster van, and you begin to understand why the van struggles down this route. However, that is it for today, guys, so thank you very much for watching, and until next time, goodbye.